We're going to take a walk today in Weaver Park, talk a little bit about its history and what the plans are for this park. I'm walking on Main Street where there's a nice bike trail to an entrance into the park and the trails. Here we are at Weaver Park at the intersection of Smith and Main in Urbana. I'm Judy Miller again with the Urbana Park District. I work at the Anita Purvis Nature Center. We met at the parking lot on Ray Street down the block here. Sorry about the traffic, but this section here is called Commissioner's Grove. It was named in honor of all the Park District's various board commissioners over the years. It's a grove of big grove timber. Big Grove was a forested area that grew along the saline branch of the Salt Fork River, and is probably why the first settlers chose to settle in this area, because there was timber available for building their homes. Busey Woods is part of the Big Grove, as are most of the big trees in Crystal Lake Park and in Urbana. We're going to take a walk into the woods and then also take a look at the prairie and talk about what's planned for this park and what's here now that you can come and visit. Let's go see what we can find. Commissioner Grove includes some very large old oak trees, chickpin oak, that we can see in the distance here, the brush in front of it. They're over 150 and 200 years old, so they're virgin timber. And the Park District is also planting new trees in this grove so that when these mature trees have lived their life and fall, there'll be other trees to take their place. The trails here at Weaver Park are all soft path or natural trails. There are no hardscapes except for the sidewalk on Main Street. So for mobility, it's a little bit of a challenge. In the distance, we can see the grade school and early childhood center for Urbana School District. This is the Preston Williams School. We'll see some other facilities on our hike as well. We're gonna head this way to an entrance into the Commissioner's Grove. Overhead, we can see a mature chinkapin oak, which is in the white oak family. Here right at the entrance to the path is a smaller tree. The oak's leaves are not as lobed as you would find in a white oak or a red oak. And there in the center we have an oak gall starting. That's where an insect has laid an egg. Here's another species of oak along the trail. This is a red oak. It has pointy lobes. It's also been lunch for several types of insects. You can see the holes that they've produced. Also along the path we have a young black walnut tree growing. These are leaflets, so the entire stem that you see there with the leaves on it is the actual leaf. These will be turning yellow in the next couple weeks as fall progresses. We're about to walk into the woods, but just at its entrance we have an elm tree. I'm not very good with my elm trees. It could be American elm, which this park does have. But it also could be a slippery or Russian elm. The interesting thing about American elms is in the 1960s there was a blight that killed most of the elms in the United States. I remember distinctly neighborhoods losing a percentage of their trees. This is similar to the emerald ash borer attacking the ash trees in the United States currently. So here's the edge of the forest that we walked along with the prairie on the left or the south. I'm facing west right now. And now we're going to proceed into the Commissioner's Grove, the wooded area. Here's another elm tree. This one's a little different than the one we saw, so this might be the American elm. The one I had before was a rough behind on the back side of it, which makes me think that it was not the American elm. This is one of the massive oaks that are survived here in the Commissioner's Grove that provides a huge canopy all the way almost to where I am standing. These oaks provide incredible habitat for forest animals and plants. For migrating birds like warblers in the spring, they come to groves like this to look for insects that are feeding on the tree, like caterpillars. When you walk in a mature forest like this, sometimes it's hard to identify the trees if you're only relying on the leaves. This tree's leaves, they are not the leaves we're seeing right now. They're the leaves way up at the tippy top. Make it difficult to rely just on the leaves. So looking at the bark of a tree can also help you. This is a black cherry, and growing on it is a vine with 5 leaves. If you've watched any of my other videos, we saw these in Busey Woods as well. This is Virginia creeper. It's a vine that grows along in the forest. Across the path, we have another vine growing, but this one has 3 leaves on it. And this is poison ivy. It's poisonous to many people, and all parts of the plant is poisonous, not just the leaves, so the bark, the stems, the roots, the berries. Although if you notice, there are holes in this leaf, which means that insects and birds can use it as a food source. Lots of birds and lots of mice eat the berries of the poison ivy. If you encounter poison ivy and think that you may have interacted with it and have it on you, wash your skin off with dish soap and cold water within an hour of exposure, and usually you can ward off the itchy spots that they provide. Don't forget to look for other plants besides trees when you're in the forest. Here we have a fall wildflower that is finished blooming. This is jump seed. It's growing along the edge, which is pretty common for it. It's called jump seed because when the seeds are ripe and you touch them, they will jump away from the plant. That's a means of dispersal for the plant to get the babies away from it so they're not competing for the same resources. Also went out hiking. Remember to look down. We have a black walnut here. This is what it looks like when it falls from the tree. It has a husk on it that decays off. Be careful when handling the black locust because this blackness is kind of inky and will stain your clothes and your skin. And then you'll find also, there's one here somewhere, there it is. Where'd it go? There, right in front of me. The walnut shell that the squirrel has to chew through and get to the meat of the seed. Sometimes in these you'll find insects, I don't see any right now, that are eating and helping to decay and turn the husk back into soil. Here's another late summer woodland flower. This is snake root. Its seed dispersal is a little different in that the seeds have hooks on them. Sorry, I can't get it to focus on. so that if you brush against it, it'll attach to your clothing or to a deer's fur and then drop off later and start a new plant. That's a second way of seed dispersal. Another means of seed dispersal is through consumption. This is an invasive plant. This is bush honeysuckle. It gets beautiful red berries in the fall that birds like to eat. However, there's not a whole lot of nutritional value. It's mostly water and seed. And birds do what birds do after they eat, or after anybody eats. You usually have to go to the bathroom, and so they deposit those seeds by droppings elsewhere and cause for the spread of bush honeysuckle. It's not a native species, and when it takes over a location, not a whole lot grows around it and under it. Some people like to think that, oh, it's good habitat for bird nests, but actually the branching is too low to the ground and allows predation on the eggs and the babies. We've completed our short hike through Commissioner Grove. It's not a very big, it's about 5 acres. We just had a squirrel cross the path. I'm hearing cardinals and blue jays. We're now going to leave the shelter of the canopy and head out into the prairie and the rest of the park. Immediately, the sounds and the look are very different than when we were in the forest. You can still hear that cardinal in the distance, but now we can hear cicadas and crickets and grasshoppers. This is Indian grass growing on the edge of the prairie here. It's a common tall grass prairie plant. It's probably about 10 feet tall. We just had a monarch land here on the goldenrod. Monarchs are getting ready to head south to Mexico for the summer. They are an endangered insect right now because a lot of their habitat has been destroyed. And there he goes. If you plant a butterfly garden with plants like milkweed, you'll attract monarch butterflies because their babies eat milkweed. The milkiness in the milkweed is a poison, and it becomes part of the caterpillar and eventually the butterfly, and makes them taste bad and makes birds sick. Let's see what else we can find as we head into the prairie. So here's the Indian grass, and up ahead is big blue stem. Looks a little different. It has 3 fronds of leaves or seeds now because it's done flowering. It's also called turkey foot because of those 3 strands of heads to it, which is another name for it. Fall is a wonderful time to visit a prairie because a lot of flowers are still in full bloom. We can see here a lot of common or giant goldenrod, but it's also a time to start gathering seeds. So our natural areas folks will start harvesting or picking the seeds off of the prairie plants to be able to plant them in other areas of the park district. This is a gray coneflower's head with seeds still on it that haven't fallen off yet. And we also have a little white aster growing here too. These very large leaves growing here in the edge of the prairie on the path next to these goldenrods and asters and coneflower is prairie dock, which is a type of sunflower. Very tall plant, easily 12 feet or taller. Interesting thing about prairie plants is that as tall as the plant is as deep as the roots go, which is what helps make the soil of the prairie so rich. We've come to a boardwalk, just a short one, because in Weaver there are several swales or waterways. This one here comes off of Main Street and heads toward a wetland that we'll be going to. It's thick with cockleburs. There's another type of seed dispersal, similar to what we saw before, where they stick to the plant or to the animal or to your pants. These are still pretty young. They look pretty painful as well. We also have some purple aster, New England aster, in the distance. It comes in a pinkish purple, and then in the distance here we can see a darker purple. Here's a closer view of the New England aster. It's one of my favorite flowers. Purple's my favorite color. And this is one of the beautiful fall. The yellow and the purple in the fall in the prairie is very beautiful. So here's the lighter pink purple, that deeper purple in the distance, and there's one actually behind this as well, mixed in with the goldenrod. Right along the path is a plant I'm not familiar with. I had to use my iNaturalist app to identify it. It's a legume or bean type plant because its seeds look like a bean and produce a bean like seed. It's called senna, and it's native to this part of the country. Rising above the goldenrod is another tall prairie plant. It's called cup plant because the leaves wrap themselves around the stem and create a cup. I can get closer so you can see inside. If we had had rain recently, there might be water inside there. This was helpful for the Native Americans as they traveled through the prairie because they could get a drink when they're out here in the hot sun. Now this plant looks like it's dead. It's just dormant. This is the indigo. It bloomed back in June and early July. But its seeds are in capsules that will pop open soon and shoot out into the prairie to disperse it. What's really fun is if you come back in the winter, these seed pods are still on the plant, and with the slightest breeze they rattle and sound a little bit like wooden shoes. It's interesting to come and visit a natural area at the different seasons and to be aware of not only the plants and animals that are living there in that season, but also the sounds and the scents that occur. One of the things I love best about a prairie is it almost looks like a huge bouquet. Here we have the white aster and the New England aster growing right next to each other with the yellow from the goldenrod. It's just a really pretty view. We haven't had a lot of insect activity yet, so it's just now starting to warm up. It was in the 40s this morning. We've got a wasp on the back of this goldenrod. There was a bee on the part here. They're still out pollinating and getting nectar to take back to their hive. Well, we've come out of the prairie and reached the wetland here. If you notice, there's a hill here, a berm, a place where we have built up the soil. The story about Weaver Park is kind of interesting. The Park District purchased this property for ball fields just past the Preston Williams School in the distance, is Prairie Park, which is where we have baseball and soccer fields, and the Park District was wanting to expand that. However, after surveying the property, we've discovered the Commissioner Grove, the part of the big grove that we had walked through earlier, and several government entities came to us about some watershed issues. The school district was building the early childhood center. Off in the distance you can see the nursing home that was in the projects to be built. And this neighborhood here to the east, Scottswoods development, had flooding issues. Whenever there was a high water event, rain event, the neighborhood would flood. So these different government agencies sat down with the Park District and we developed a watershed plan to help mediate the water from the building projects and the flooding. And we built this berm to help stop the water from going into the neighborhood and directed water into this wetland. It's about 12 acres. It has water coming from the little creek that we walked over with the bridge, and water coming from over by the nursing home. And that water comes and sits here in the wetland and exits through a drain pipe to the south of the park. In 2006, the landscaping and the building was done here, and then in the spring of 2007, Urbana had 2 flood events, and in both of those flood events the neighborhood did not flood, and it has not flooded since. In the spring you could come out here and see lots of waterfowl. It's a great place to come and listen for frogs throughout the summer and spring, and it's just a really pretty gem. I'm going to end today's video with this beautiful view. I'm up on top of the berm. You can see the school in the distance, and